Hi guys, so I'm in a really shitty mood today and I just felt like making a video and basically just talking straight from the soul about like how I feel, and I just kind of want to reiterate this point I've made in the past, which is you have all these people right online and stuff who obsess about physical appearance, and like height and stuff like that. Well, I guess that is a subcategory of physical appearance. But yeah, they obsess about it in the sense that they insist, and a certain insist, that physical appearance is the primary factor in determining success and quality of life in multiple important fields, right? So, of course, one of the main things they talk about is like dating, right? So it's like, especially if you're a guy, right? It's like if I mean, some of them, go very hyperbolic about it, and they talk about, this whole 80-20 rule and stuff like that, right? Which is total nonsense. And they basically say, oh, you've got to be like in the top 20% to like ever like have a girl like say hi to you or something crazy, right? And it's just like, that's just demonstrably false, because an overwhelming majority of people, men, women, do have relationships. They do have at least some romantic success. And in fact, I kind of want to expand on that point, because it's not just that an overwhelming majority have some romantic success. They have fulfillment. You get obviously, yes, some like, women obviously like get kind of like treated badly and messed around in dating and stuff, but a lot of the time those women actually are neurodivergent themselves, and they're subject to exploitation and so on, and that kind of is the cause of their problems, not their looks. And of course for men it's arguably an even more dire situation, because again, the overwhelming majority of men, do get girlfriends at some point. They do, even get married and stuff, and have a long string of relationships at least. But that's not really the case for one subset of men, and it's not the bottom 80% in terms of looks. No, it's like the bottom few percent in terms of neurotype. And this isn't just me talking out my ass. There's loads of data out there I've shown you before in the past, and that basically shows that, about 50% of autistic men are virgins, like totally, and only about 1 in 6 are in a relationship. And so that's really bad, and that is, when you compare it to the general population, those are extremely poor statistics. Really bad. And of course with romantic rejection comes mental health problems, and of course among autistic people comorbidities are extremely high, such as depression, anxiety, and ADHD, which arguably is co-occurring rather than caused by autism. But yeah, that's all those, the mental health statistics are really bad. And another thing I want to mention as well, and I'm going to go a bit further in depth in a minute as to why all this is happening, but employment statistics are very bad. So I always talk about this because it's very important, but yeah, only about 1 in 7, 1 in 6, or 15%. I'm trying to find the most relevant fraction, most appropriate fraction. But only about 15% of autistic people in most Western countries are in full-time employment, and only about 29%, at least I'm going by the UK statistics, are in even any like part-time employment. So it's really bad, and this kind of ties back into what I was talking about with the whole dating thing, right? Because, what is true is that if people aren't employed, then they're going to have less money, and less confidence, less social status, and so on. And those things do affect your ability to find a partner, and not just to find a partner or like, you know, to get your rocks off or whatever, but like also just to like make friends and have a social life, and yeah, just kind of feel respected in your community. And you know, this issue is compounded by the fact that there's very little understanding of the plight of autistic people, especially among older generations, and so there's a lot of stigma, a lot of prejudice around people with autism who do struggle to have or advance their careers. And I'm one of those people, you know. I'm one of the majority. I'm 85%, I guess you could say, and that sucks. And yeah, actually, I've like never really like had a full-time employment for like more than like a week or two at one point, you know, and you know, I'm in my late 20s now, so that's bad. And you know, it's like they say, right? Once you have a gap in your employment, whatever, you know, like you're older and stuff, it becomes much more difficult. So yeah, there's that, and that really sucks. But yeah, I kind of want to get into like why all this is happening, and it kind of goes back to this core concept, right, of, you know, how like neurotype is the most important factor out of anything else, really, and I stand by that. And you know, that does kind of ruffle a lot of feathers, I've noticed, because there are lots of people who just are stuck by this, you know, you call them the BPers, right? They're stuck by, they're like, they insist on the doctrine that physical appearance is like not just like the most important thing, but the only thing that matters. And like, I'm not going to sit here and like tell you that, oh no, like looks don't matter at all in anything. It's all just about neurotype. Like I know that physical appearance does matter, but I'm saying it's not the primary thing. And also you have to take into account that some of those physical appearance aspects are caused by your neurodevelopmental problems. You know, like for me, for example, I know that I slouch, I have poor posture, and that's because of anxiety, which is caused by, you know, but by being neurodivergent. And I also, you know, I also don't make eye contact that much. And of course, when people are looking at you and they're seeing you're not making eye contact. And so, you know, that's not, you know, people generally don't like that. And, you know, that does kind of invoke the whole uncanny valley thing. And this uncanny valley thing, this concept, if you don't know what it is, look it up. But it's really like overlooked by a lot of people. I mean, consciously at least. Of course, subconsciously, it's extremely important. But, you know, I guess the way to explain it, because this is something that, you know, people who aren't like autistic or severely ADHD or whatever, they kind of take this for granted. But like, if you've ever like gone on YouTube and like you're like listening to like a song, right? And if you listen to it on like standard playback rate, like 1 time, it sounds normal, right? But if you change it just a little bit, like to 1.05 or something, you know, you'd have to like change it to 2 times, just like a little bit, like a few percentage points off, right? It just sounds weird, and sometimes it can sound cool, but a lot of the time it just doesn't. It's just not the kind of music, the vibe you're looking for, right? And I think that's a really good analogy to explain what it's like to kind of have, you know, these kind of on the face of it, they're sort of like minor behavioral abnormalities, like slightly irregular eye contact or just not picking up on social cues, having different styles of communication, delayed response, delayed like processing of social information and stuff. You know, even though it might not seem like a big deal, because like you're still kind of getting like most of the information and stuff, you know, it does make a big difference, and it puts people off. And, you know, of course, this can affect, you know, it can affect your dating prospects, because, you know, if you're somewhere like socializing or whatever, or, you know, even if you're online dating, right, and you put a profile picture up, right, and sure, maybe the person's going to look at the profile picture and see that, oh, you're like, in their height range or whatever, and they'll be like, oh wow, okay, that person looks attractive, cool, like kind of cute, whatever. Let's meet up. But then when you meet up, then your behavioural differences are shown, and that's even if because like the thing is, when you're autistic and you struggle to make friends, like I know the thing of online dating, right, is people, when I don't do it anymore, of course, because I've just, for various reasons, but like people say that like oh, you should take pictures of loads of like all your friends and stuff, in a social setting or whatever. And it's like, well, yeah, if you didn't have any friends, like because you can't make friends, or because you struggle to make friends because you're autistic, like what can you can't do that, right? And you can't make the right eye contact with the camera, but again, like posture issues, whatever, like all these things make a difference. And so, but anyway, back to the whole idea. But yeah, okay, let's say someone likes the way you look and then they meet up with you, then what? Or even if they do like you and it's like it's impersonal, whatever, and they come over and try and talk to you. Like this has happened to me, like in the past, right? Where someone thinks, because like I've told you before, but I am quite tall. I do like work out, and in many ways I am conventionally attractive. I'm not going to post my face here though, but yeah, sometimes people will approach you and stuff, or and sometimes that's happened before, and it's literally been like years after the event when I've kind of realized, oh wait, that person was like talking to me because they were like interested in me, but oh, they were flirting with me, and I didn't realize that. And of course, if you realize that like months or years later, it's too late, right? But also, like, even if you do realize it, and then when you've got this delayed, processing of like social situations and stuff, and you gotta like want to try and like act so as to avoid the uncanny valley, like you try and respond, and then it's just like a total minefield, because if you do something that's just a little bit off, that can totally give someone the ick and put them off completely. And just, I think one of the main difficulties as well is just a communication deficit, and you got to remember that, like, I know in the past some people have said, I like talk too much about like the whole dating aspect and stuff, but there's other, aspects to this problem. And yeah, there are, because all the things I'm outlining actually, do affect other areas of life, such as just, making friends, having a social life, but also, like I've talked about a minute ago, like, employment, right? If you go to a job interview, assuming you even get an interview with your massive gaps in employment because, for being autistic, right? Let's say, somehow like the AI algorithm looks over that and you win the lottery ticket through, the AI algorithm of getting a job interview, right? Then you show up there, and again, I know in like many Western countries, like you can kind of ask for accommodations and things like that. But a lot of the time, even if you do that, like people don't understand what autism is and like how it can affect, how you present, like your behavior and stuff. And so, even if someone's like, oh yeah, maybe they're autistic, oh, that's okay, we'll just like, give them a little bit more time to answer a question or something. But, what if they don't understand, like, oh, this guy's not making eye contact, oh, he missed this social cue, he said this thing that, because I'm neurotypical, I can understand, I take it for granted that this thing is like inappropriate or whatever, and, this person doesn't understand that the autistic person doesn't understand that, if you know what I mean. All those things are like really like factors that work against the autistic person in that area of life as well. But, I think like the thing I haven't talked about enough in the past really with this, and I think it's so important, is just like, just like the social aspect of it in general. Like, for like, I've always had like some people who I'd call friends, like growing up, like, but I've always been like, like a class B friend to them or something, like a backup friend, but I've still been there a little bit. But like, if I had better social skills, I could have had so many more friends by now, and when you just kind of see like groups of people like hanging out together and everyone's just, acting carefree and stuff, and, you can just tell that like that person has got a broad social network, and, they're respected by lots of people because they, are full-time employed, and because they always pick up on social cues and stuff, and they just know how to like behave basically in a neurotypical way. Like that just really makes me really sad, because, just because like I can't like meet these expectations of how to behave, like how to socialize, it doesn't mean I don't want to socialize at all. I do. When I've had friends, when I've been hanging out with friends, a lot of the time, it's been nice and it feels good, and that is a very, natural need to want that, to want alliances, right, and to have like have a place in a social like network or whatever, right? And yeah, like the fact that like autism just is such like just inhibits that ability like so like profoundly, just makes it really, it makes me sad. It brings me, it's brought me to the verge of tears so many times, just seeing everyone else just be able to just get on with having these stable like social groups, and with lots of people, and just being part of it and just going with the flow like socially, and not having to worry about all these things. That does make me sad, and it makes me a lot of the time it makes me feel like I'm just not a very nice person. And because if I was a nice person, then I lots of people, everyone would want to be friends with me, right? But I know it's not that simple, and I do try and be nice to people, and I get things wrong, and I know like that's not all my fault, and I do try, but it just doesn't work a lot of the time. Yeah, and I just can't, kind of going back to the main point of this video, like, yeah, there are these people who just like think that like, oh, I must be lying about like my appearance, oh, I must be like 5 foot tall and like, have like no jawbone or whatever, and like I don't know, like some, I don't even know, what the terminology people like that use nowadays is, but it's just ridiculous. Like I see people who they would rate as like 1s or even 0s out of 10, being part of a social group and stuff. And the thing is, like, there is some validity in looks, like I've said. It might, it does have an effect on, whether like, if you're like 5 foot and like people around you are 6 foot, like you're probably not going to be like the leader of the social group, and you're probably not going to be able to, like get like the most desirable like partner, like at least in appearance. Like I get that, but like you're still there, you're still like in the running, kind of. Whereas if you're autistic, it really is like it really never began, and I know that's a colloquialism, but I think it's very relevant here. Yeah, it just never began. Like that, you never stood a chance in the first place, and so it's like a whole different level of hopelessness, if you know what I mean. And yeah, why do people insist on this so much? I kind of want to address that a bit. So, like, I think one of the reasons is that, you get lots of influencers out there who are like, they want to like sell their supplements or, their gym classes or whatever to try and, help people that way. And also, but I think the main reason, which is an even darker reason than that, in my opinion, is that you get these people who, probably are neurodivergent, at least in some sense, and they can't seem to, get where they want in their careers or their social lives or their, dating lives, which might not even be existent, and, they want to blame it on their looks, right? Because if they're blaming it on their neurotype, on the fact that, they can't pick up on social cues, they don't know how to act in, in front of other people, and all those problems that come with autism, which I go into more details in other videos. But like, they don't, to come to terms with that, like that reality, that like this is such a fundamental problem with like such a fundamental part of your body, like, because the brain is the most fundamental part of the body, right? If you believe in, the concept of the soul is basically just, at least from a materialist perspective, the concept of the soul is just like your neurons firing around in your brain, right? Like it's what makes you, and the fact that there's something fundamentally different with that, that you can't change. It's like, it's your personality. It's wired so deeply into you. It's not like, I have a scar on my forehead or something, and that means like I can't get girlfriend or whatever. It's totally, it's on a whole different level. It's like your personality, and you can't change that. And it's also just the fact that, like, I've said this before, but because I am one of those, people, with a neurodevelopmental disorder, like, there's a limit to, like, how much I can totally understand about how it affects me. Like, I mean, I can understand, like, academically, like, I can look at statistics, I can see, like, certain social situations where I'm just not, succeeding, and I can attribute that to like, my autism or whatever. But, like, I don't know what it's like to be neurotypical. And so it's kind of hard to almost accept that, and yeah, just the fact that it's a fundamental issue that you have, and actually, like, the problem goes far beyond, like, I can't, you can't get the girlfriend you want or whatever. It's so much more beyond that. It affects almost every aspect of your life. And I think for a lot of people to kind of accept that, would kind of destroy them, to be honest. It would just shatter their soul. Again, I don't know if the soul's a real thing, but, and I think that's one of the reasons why as well. Whereas, if they're just like, it's just because there's like, there's this, it's because, like, I'm not 6 foot and other people are shallow, that is a cope, kind of. And, I mean, I'm taller than 6 foot, so I can't use that cope anyway, but, like, and yeah, it's just ridiculous. And yeah, like I said, it's just the statistics are so terrible for autistic people in most important aspects of life, And yeah, I'm sick of people sitting there and insisting that, no, it's, it's all just to do with physical appearance, it's all just to do with looks. And, autism is just like, it doesn't matter if you're like really good looking or whatever, it still does. So yeah, I think that's what I wanted to rant about today. I hope you found it interesting. And yeah, just let me know your thoughts, and I'll talk to you soon.